My boss fired me for leaving work to feed my baby cousin, said people like you always flake. He said what? He actually said that to my face. Like my needing to leave for an hour to feed my baby cousin during an emergency made me unreliable? Flaky? Then he fired me. And the worst part? I later found out it wasn't just about that. He was planning this, but the real betrayal? It came from someone I trusted completely. Were they in on it too? Stay tuned, because this is a story about trust, lies, and the devastating consequences of workplace games. Find out what lengths I went to for justice. The fluorescent lights buzzed above my head, casting a sickly yellow glow on the cheap office carpet. My heart hammered against my ribs. I don't understand, I stammered, clutching the termination letter like it was a burning coal. Mark, you can't just fire me for this. Mark, my boss, leaned back in his faux leather chair, his face a mask of forced sympathy. I'm sorry, he said, the words sounding hollow and rehearsed. But we need someone reliable. Clients depend on us. The rain lashed against the windows, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. It had been a chaotic morning. My cousin Sarah had called in a panic. Her daycare had an outbreak of chicken pox, and she had no one to watch her 6-month-old. Sarah's husband was out of state for work. I knew I had to help. Family always comes first, right? I'd rushed home during my lunch break, fed little Lily, and then rushed back to the office, barely 30 minutes late. I'd even offered to stay late to catch up. But Mark didn't care. People like you, he'd said, his voice dripping with condescension. Always flake. The words stung. I'd always been a dedicated employee, exceeding expectations, going the extra mile. And now, because of one unavoidable emergency, I was being branded as unreliable. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him exactly what I thought of his reliable company. But I bit my tongue, knowing it wouldn't do any good. The meeting was over quickly. I gathered my belongings, a lump forming in my throat. As I walked past my cubicle, I saw a few of my colleagues watching me, their faces etched with pity. Even Kevin, my friend Sarah's boyfriend, seemed uncomfortable. He avoided eye contact. Was something going on? The walk home was a blur. The rain soaked through my coat, chilling me to the bone. The city noises faded into a dull hum as my mind raced. How was I going to pay my bills? How was I going to explain this to my family? And most importantly, how could Mark treat me like this after everything I'd done for the company? I spent the rejection emails piled up in my inbox. The hope I had was slowly extinguished. I had dedicated so much time and work to this job. It became increasingly hard to ignore the gnawing suspicion that something more sinister was at play. It wasn't just the daycare incident. Was this a setup? One evening, I went to Sarah's apartment for dinner. Kevin was there, fiddling with his phone, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced with a quiet unease. "Are you okay?" I asked him, setting my purse down on the floor. "You seem different." He looked up, startled, and forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just work stuff." I didn't push it, but his reaction bothered me. We ate in awkward silence, the tension hanging heavy in the air. After dinner, Sarah asked me to help her with Lily's bath. As I reached for a towel, I noticed Kevin had left his phone on the coffee table, the screen still lit. A message popped up from a group chat, the name displayed boldly at the top, the inner circle. Curiosity gnawed at me. It was wrong, I knew, but I couldn't resist. I glanced around to make sure no one was watching, then quickly picked up the phone. The messages were a jumbled mess of work, gossip, and inside jokes. But one message caught my eye, sent by Kevin. "She's gone. Mission accomplished." A reply from someone called Big Boss Mark read, "Good job, Kevin. The bonus is wired." My blood ran cold. The room seemed to spin. I dropped the phone, the clatter echoing in the suddenly silent apartment. Kevin and Sarah rushed into the living room, their faces filled with concern. "What happened?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. I couldn't speak. I pointed at the phone, my hand shaking. Kevin's face turned ashen. He knew. He knew I'd seen the messages. "Explain this," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. Sarah looked from me to Kevin, her eyes wide with confusion. Kevin stammered, trying to come up with an explanation, but the words wouldn't come. He was caught. "It's not what you think. Mark made me do it. He said if I didn't help him get rid of you, he'd fire me." "Get rid of me," I repeated, the words catching in my throat. "What are you talking about?" Kevin confessed everything. Mark had been planning to restructure the department for months, but he wanted to replace me with his friend's daughter. I was too valuable to fire without cause, so he'd asked Kevin to fabricate negative feedback, exaggerate minor mistakes, and generally make my life miserable. The daycare incident had been the perfect excuse. "He paid me extra," Kevin admitted, hanging his head in shame. I needed the money. We're saving for a house." I stared at him, disbelief warring with anger. My friend's boyfriend, someone I'd always trusted, had betrayed me for a few extra dollars. And Mark, my boss, had orchestrated the whole thing. It was calculated, malicious, and completely unfair. I walked out of Sarah's apartment, leaving Kevin to face the music. The rain had stopped, and a sliver of moon peeked through the clouds, but the darkness inside me remained. How could I trust anyone again? How could I forgive Kevin for what he'd done? And more importantly, what was I going to do about Mark? Should I go to HR? Would they even believe me? Or should I take matters into my own hands? She listened patiently as I recounted my story, her expression growing increasingly grim. "This is a clear case of wrongful termination and defamation," she said, once I'd finished. "We can sue Mark for damages and get your job back." My initial reaction was relief. Justice. That was all I wanted. But as I thought about it more, I realized that going back to that office, working alongside Mark and Kevin, would be unbearable. It would be a constant reminder of their betrayal. I also knew that suing Mark would be a long, expensive, and emotionally draining process, and there was no guarantee that I would win. What if he managed to cover his tracks? What if he smeared my name even further? I spent weeks agonizing over what to do. I talked to my family, my friends, anyone who would listen. Some people urged me to fight back, to make Mark pay for what he'd done. Others advised me to move on, to focus on finding a new job and putting the past behind me. One afternoon, I was walking through the park, trying to clear my head. I sat down on a bench, watching a group of children playing. Their laughter filled the air, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. As I watched them, I realized something. I couldn't let Mark's actions define me. I couldn't let his bitterness and deceit consume me. I had to move on, to rebuild my life, to prove to myself and to everyone else that I was more than just a victim. I went back to my lawyer and told her my decision. I wasn't going to sue. Instead, I was going to focus on finding a new job, on building a better future for myself. She looked surprised, but she respected my decision. "That takes courage," she said, "and I admire you for it." It wasn't easy. The job market was tough, and I was still dealing with the emotional fallout from my firing. But I persevered. I networked, I took online courses, and I practiced my interviewing skills. And not just any offer, but a great offer. A smaller company, but it was growing fast, and they needed someone with my experience. The interview process had been intense, but the people seemed genuine and supportive. And the best part? The CEO, a woman named Alicia, valued my skills and my work ethic. I accepted the offer without hesitation. This was my chance to start over, to prove myself, to show Mark that he hadn't broken me. On my first day, I walked into the office with my head held high, ready to take on the world. The atmosphere was completely different from my previous job. People were smiling, collaborating, and genuinely enjoying their work. It was like stepping into a different universe. Alicia greeted me warmly, introducing me to the team and showing me around the office. She made me feel welcome and valued from the very beginning. "We're so glad to have you here," she said, her eyes sparkling. "I've heard great things about your work. I excelled at my responsibilities. I built strong relationships with my colleagues, and I quickly became an integral part of the team." Alicia recognized my hard work and dedication, and she rewarded me with promotions and opportunities for growth. Meanwhile, I heard through the grapevine that things weren't going so well at my old company. Mark's restructuring had backfired. He lost several key clients, and morale was at an all-time low. Kevin had been demoted and was now working in a different department. He was miserable. One day I ran into Sarah at the grocery store. She looked tired and stressed. "How are you doing?" I asked, my voice filled with genuine concern. "Not great," she admitted, sighing heavily. "Kevin's been a mess. He feels terrible about what happened with you. He's been having trouble sleeping, and he's been drinking too much." I felt a pang of sympathy for her. She was caught in the middle of a situation that wasn't her fault. "I'm sorry," I said. "Tell him I said I hope he gets better." As I walked away, I thought about Kevin and Mark. They had both made mistakes, terrible mistakes. But holding on to anger and resentment wasn't going to do me any good. It was only going to poison my own soul. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about excusing their behavior. It was about letting go of the pain, about freeing myself from the burden of bitterness. It was about choosing to move forward, to focus on the positive aspects of my life, and to create a future filled with happiness and success. It was about me, not them. A year later, I was thriving at my new job. I'd been promoted to a senior management position, and I was leading a team of talented and dedicated individuals. I'd even started my own side business, a consulting firm that helped small businesses improve their customer service strategies. I was happy, successful, and fulfilled. And most importantly, I was free. I was free from the negativity of my past, free from the bitterness of betrayal, and free to create the life I had always dreamed of. One evening, I received an email from Kevin. It was long and heartfelt. He apologized for his actions, acknowledging the pain and damage he had caused. He explained that he had been motivated by fear and desperation, but that he now understood the gravity of his mistake. He asked for my forgiveness. I read the email slowly, carefully considering each word. It was genuine, sincere, and filled with remorse. After a long pause, I replied. I told him that I understood, that I forgave him, and that I hoped he could find peace. I knew it wouldn't erase the past, but it was a step in the right direction. I needed him to get better as much as he needed to say sorry. I also sent an anonymous tip to a local newspaper about Mark's unethical business practices. A few weeks later, an exposé was published, detailing his mismanagement and deceit. He was eventually fired from his job, and his reputation was ruined. Some might say that was my revenge, but it wasn't. It was simply justice. It was a consequence of his actions, and it was a reminder that actions have consequences, both good and bad. Looking back on everything that happened, I realized that being fired was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to reevaluate my priorities, to rediscover my strengths, and to create a life that was truly aligned with my values. It taught me the importance of resilience, the power of forgiveness, and the unwavering belief in myself. I may have been betrayed, but I refused to be broken. I chose to rise above, to learn from my mistakes, and to create a future filled with purpose and passion. I became a champion for ethical workplace practices, speaking out against bullying and discrimination and advocating for fair treatment for all employees. I wanted to use my experience to help others, to prevent them from suffering the same pain and injustice that I had endured. And you know what? I succeeded. I made a difference. I changed lives. And that, my friends, is the ultimate revenge. Not revenge in the traditional sense, but revenge in the form of success, in the form of happiness, and in the form of making the world a better place. So what would you have done in my shoes? Would you have sued Mark? Would you have sought revenge? Or would you have chosen forgiveness and moved on? Tell me in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of betrayal, resilience, and triumph. Because life, as they say, is a journey, not a destination. And sometimes, the most unexpected detours lead us to the most beautiful destinations. The journey is often painful, but the final destination is worth all the suffering. It's funny, how life throws curveballs when you least expect them. Just when you think you've got it all figured out, bam! Something happens that knocks you completely off course. This happened at the Christmas party, office, and with my husband. And now, looking back, it makes me wonder, was I ever truly happy there? Or was I just comfortable? The comfort of a routine, the familiarity of faces, the illusion of security. I remember one particularly dreary Tuesday, about a month before I was fired. The sky was a solid gray, and the office lights hummed with a relentless monotony. I was drowning in spreadsheets, my eyes glazed over with numbers and formulas. Mark walked past my cubicle, a smug smile on his face. He didn't say anything, but his eyes lingered on my screen, as if he were silently judging my every move. I felt a chill run down my spine. It was just a look, but it felt predatory. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. But the feeling persisted. That night, I came home exhausted, my head pounding. My husband David was already home, watching TV. He barely glanced up when I walked in. "Hey," he mumbled, his eyes glued to the screen. "How was work?" "Terrible," I said, collapsing on the couch beside him. Mark's being a jerk again. I feel like he's constantly breathing down my neck. David shrugged. "Just ignore him," he said. "He's always been a pain." I wanted to talk about it more, to vent my frustrations, but David seemed disinterested. He was more concerned with the football game on TV. I sighed and went to the kitchen to make dinner. As I chopped vegetables, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. David had been distant lately, preoccupied and secretive. He'd been working late more often, and he was always on his phone, texting someone. I tried to talk to him about it, but he brushed me off, saying I was being insecure. But my gut told me something different. The office Christmas party was coming up, and I was dreading it. It was always a forced, awkward affair, filled with strained conversations and bad karaoke. But this year, I had an even worse feeling about it. The night of the party arrived, and I reluctantly got dressed in a sequined dress I'd bought on sale. David seemed more excited than usual, which was odd. He even complimented my appearance, something he rarely did anymore. As we drove to the party, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The venue was a generic ballroom, decorated with tinsel and cheap ornaments. The music was loud and the atmosphere was stifling. I immediately spotted Mark holding court near the bar, surrounded by a group of sycophantic colleagues. I tried to avoid him, but he caught my eye and gave me a knowing smirk. It sent a shiver down my spine. Later in the evening, I saw David talking to Sarah, Kevin's girlfriend. They were standing in a corner, away from the crowd, and they seemed to be deep in conversation. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language was intimate. Sarah was laughing, and David's hand was resting on her arm. I felt a surge of jealousy and anger. What was going on between them? I walked over to them, trying to appear casual. "Hey guys," I said, forcing a smile. "What are you talking about?" David jumped, startled. He quickly removed his hand from Sarah's arm. "Oh, just work stuff," he stammered. Sarah's face was flushed. She avoided my gaze. I didn't believe them. I knew something was going on. The rest of the party was a blur. I tried to enjoy myself, but I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. I felt like everyone was keeping secrets from me. As we drove home that night, I confronted David. "What was that all about with Sarah?" I asked, my voice trembling. He denied everything, saying I was imagining things, but I wasn't convinced. I decided to go into the office early, hoping to get some work done before the chaos of the day began. As I walked past Mark's office, I noticed that his door was slightly ajar. I hesitated for a moment, then pushed it open. The office was empty, but something on his desk caught my eye. It was a folder labeled confidential. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened the folder and began to read. Inside, I found a series of documents detailing Mark's plan to restructure the department, and my name was all over them. He'd been collecting negative feedback from my colleagues, exaggerating my mistakes, and creating a false narrative of incompetence. And then I saw it. A document with David's signature on it. It was a statement corroborating Mark's claims about my performance. My world shattered. My own husband had betrayed me. He'd been working with Mark to get me fired. I stumbled out of Mark's office, my head spinning. I couldn't breathe. How could he do this to me? Why? I ran to my cubicle and grabbed my purse. I couldn't stay there any longer. I needed to get out. As I walked through the office, I saw Kevin watching me, his face etched with guilt. He knew what was happening. I glared at him, my eyes filled with tears. He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I walked out of the office, leaving everything behind. I didn't care about my job, my belongings, or anything else. All I wanted was to escape. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with questions and accusations. When I arrived, David was already there, waiting for me. He saw the look on my face and knew that I knew. He didn't say anything. He just hung his head in shame. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Why did you do it?" I didn't want to," he said. "Mark threatened me. He said he'd fire me if I didn't cooperate." I didn't believe him. I knew there was more to it than that. "What else?" I demanded. He hesitated for a moment, then confessed. He'd been having an affair with Sarah for months. Mark knew about it, and he used it as leverage to force David to help him get rid of me. He promised David a promotion if he cooperated, and threatened to expose his affair if he didn't. My heart broke. The man I loved, the man I had built my life with, had betrayed me in the most devastating way possible. I didn't say anything. I just turned and walked away. I packed a bag and left the house, leaving David behind. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do. All I knew was that I couldn't stay there any longer. I needed to escape, to heal, and to rebuild my life. Alone, I found a small apartment in a different part of town. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't stop crying. I felt like my world had been turned upside down. I had lost my job, my husband, and my friends. I was alone and broken. But slowly, gradually, I began to heal. I started seeing a therapist who helped me process my emotions and develop coping mechanisms. I started exercising, eating healthy, and taking care of myself. And I started reaching out to my family and friends, who offered me support and encouragement. I realized that I wasn't alone. I had people who cared about me, who loved me, and who wanted to see me succeed. And that gave me the strength to keep going. What do you think you would have done in my place? The only thing I could think about was picking up the pieces. One afternoon, I was browsing through a bookstore, trying to find a distraction from my thoughts. I stumbled upon a self-help book titled Reinventing Yourself. I scoffed at first, thinking it was just another cliché-ridden guide to happiness. But something about the cover caught my eye, and I decided to buy it. I started reading the book that evening, and I was surprised by how much it resonated with me. It talked about the importance of self-discovery, setting goals, and taking action. It encouraged me to identify my passions, my strengths, and my values, and it challenged me to create a vision for my future. Inspired by the book, I started writing in a journal. I poured out my thoughts, my feelings, and my dreams. I reflected on my past experiences, both good and bad, and I started to identify the patterns in my life. I realized that I had always been a people pleaser, putting others' needs before my own. I had allowed myself to be taken advantage of, manipulated, and betrayed. and I had lost sight of who I truly was. But now I was determined to change. I was determined to take control of my life, to set my own course, and to create a future that was filled with joy, purpose, and fulfillment. I started small. I enrolled in a cooking class, something I had always wanted to do. I joined a book club, where I met a group of interesting and intelligent women, and I started volunteering at a local animal shelter, where I found solace in the company of furry friends. As I pursued these new activities, I began to feel a sense of purpose and excitement that I hadn't felt in years. I was rediscovering my passions, my talents, and my true self. I also started exploring new career opportunities. I updated my resume, practiced my interviewing skills, and started networking with people in my field. I was hesitant at first, afraid of rejection. But I pushed myself to step outside of my comfort zone, to take risks, and to believe in my abilities. And to my surprise, I started getting interviews. One day, I received a call from a company that was looking for a marketing director. The position was a step up from my previous job, and it offered a higher salary and more responsibilities. I was nervous about the interview, but I prepared thoroughly. I researched the company, practiced my answers, and dressed in my most professional attire. The interview went well. I felt confident, articulate, and engaged. I was honest about my past experiences, including my firing, but I framed it as a learning opportunity. I highlighted my strengths, my accomplishments, and my passion for marketing. A week later, I received a call from the company. They offered me the job. I was ecstatic. I had done it. I had reinvented myself. I had overcome adversity and landed a dream job. I accepted the offer without hesitation. This was my chance to prove myself, to excel in my field, and to create a successful and fulfilling career. The Guillaume. I walked into the office with a renewed sense of purpose and confidence. I was ready to take on any challenge, to lead my team to success, and to make a positive impact on the company. And I did. I quickly established myself as a capable and effective leader. I implemented new marketing strategies, improved customer engagement, and increased sales revenue. I earned the respect of my colleagues, my employees, and my superiors. I was thriving in my new role. One evening, I received a message from David. He asked if we could meet for coffee. I hesitated for a moment, then agreed. I knew I needed to face him, to get closure, and to move on with my life. We met at a small cafe near my apartment. He looked tired and chowquay. He apologized profusely for his actions, expressing his remorse and regret. He explained that he had made a terrible mistake, that he had been weak and manipulated, and that he deeply regretted hurting me. I listened patiently, without interrupting. I could see the sincerity in his eyes. I could feel the pain in his voice. After he finished speaking, I took a deep breath and spoke. "David," I said, "I forgive you." He looked up at me, surprised. "Really?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I forgive you, but that doesn't mean we can be together again. I can't trust you anymore. I need to move on with my life." He nodded, understanding. "I understand," he said. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm grateful that you've given it to me." We talked for a while longer, sharing memories and exchanging updates about our lives. It was a bittersweet conversation, filled with both sadness and hope. As we said goodbye, I felt a sense of closure. I had forgiven David, and I had released myself from the burden of anger and resentment. I was free to move forward, to embrace my future, and to create a life that was filled with love, happiness, and fulfillment. She'd been through a lot: a divorce, a job change, and more. She started working in customer service, but she wanted to move into management. She knew that she had the skills to be a manager, but she didn't have the experience. So she started volunteering to lead projects. She took extra courses in her field. She always asked questions about how the team and department worked. She sought a mentor. She practiced answering common interview questions. She asked for feedback. She didn't get discouraged by the rejections. She used the feedback that she was given, and she kept going, and eventually she got promoted. But it wasn't just about the money or the title. It was about proving to herself that she could do it. It was about building her confidence, and it was about taking control of her life. We all deserve that. What do you think? What's the most helpful? Time, isn't it strange? How it can both heal and scar. I remember after landing the new job, there was this stillness, like the world had the office, bathed in sunlight streaming through large windows, felt like a haven compared to the fluorescent-lit prison I'd escaped. My new colleagues, with their genuine smiles and collaborative spirit, were a breath of fresh air. One woman especially stood out. Her name was Maria, and she was the head of the product development team. She had this quiet confidence, a way of making everyone around her feel heard and valued. She took me under her wing, offering guidance and support as I navigated the complexities of my new role. One day, Maria invited me to lunch. We went to a small Italian restaurant, the aroma of garlic and oregano filling the air. As we ate, we talked about everything, our careers, our families, our dreams. She shared her own stories of overcoming adversity, of facing challenges head-on, and of never giving up on her goals. I was inspired by her resilience, her wisdom, and her unwavering optimism. She became a mentor, a confidant, and a true friend. And slowly but surely, I began to believe in myself again. I started taking on new projects, pushing myself to learn and grow. I volunteered to lead team meetings, sharing my ideas and insights. And I started speaking up in meetings, voicing my opinions and challenging the status quo. My confidence soared. I felt empowered, capable, and unstoppable. My boss, Lisa, noticed my transformation. She praised my work ethic, my creativity, and my leadership skills. She gave me more responsibility, trusting me to manage larger projects and mentor junior employees. One evening, Lisa invited me to her office. The sky outside was a fiery orange, casting a warm glow on the room. She closed the door and sat down at her desk. "I wanted to talk to you about something," she said, her voice serious. I braced myself, wondering what was coming. "I've been watching you closely," she continued, "and I'm incredibly impressed with your progress. You've come a long way in a short amount of time." I smiled, feeling a surge of pride. "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate that." "I'm thinking about promoting you," she said, her eyes sparkling. My heart skipped a beat. "Really?" I asked, barely able to contain my excitement. "Yes," she said. "I think you have the potential to be a senior leader in this company. I want you to take on a new role, one that will challenge you and allow you to grow even further." She offered me the position of Vice President of Marketing. It was a huge opportunity, a dream come true. I accepted the offer without hesitation. I knew it would be challenging, but I was ready. I was ready to take on the responsibility, to lead my team to new heights, and to make a lasting impact on the company. The news spread quickly throughout the office. My colleagues congratulated me, offering their support and encouragement. Even Maria, my mentor and friend, was overjoyed. "I knew you could do it," she said, hugging me tightly. "I'm so proud of you." As I prepared to step into my new role, I reflected on my journey. I had come so far from the day I was fired, broken and defeated. I had overcome adversity, rebuilt my life, and achieved my dreams. And now I was ready to pay it forward, to help others find their own path to success.